Alleluia, Christ is risen.
Christ is risen indeed. Alleluia.
The season of Easter lasts 7 weeks, which means today is the 4th Sunday of Easter, not after Easter, of Easter. We're still in the season of Easter. And during these 7 weeks, we're hearing stories of resurrection. And some of them are stories about Jesus' resurrection, and some of them are an expanded view of resurrection, like we're going to hear today. Today we hear a story that technically isn't really resurrection, it's resuscitation. A story that my scientific mind has a hard time taking at face value. More about that later. When I look at it up close, the details make me skeptical, but when I look at it from further away, I can see patterns that offer us a word of how to be people of the resurrection. Sort of like this quilt up here, if you look up close, you will see all kinds of details that you can't see from far away, but you need to step away in order to see the bigger pattern of the rainbow in steps going across the pattern, across the quilt. Two different experiences of the same quilt, up close and further away, two different experiences of the biblical stories, up close and further away. We'll do a little of both.
So today's first lesson, a psalm. And as I was reading in preparation for today, I couldn't help but be reminded of a lesson that admittedly I am still learning. Can you hear me okay? Okay, sorry. A lesson that I'm still learning, which is one about actually having faith and trusting in God's plan, even if it's not panning out the way that I imagined or hoped it would. So today's first lesson affirms that even in seemingly dire circumstances, God is with us and will take care of us. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me lie down in green pastures and lead me beside still waters. You revive my soul and guide me along right pathways for your name's sake. Though I walk through the valley and the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table before me in the presence of those who trouble me. You have anointed my head with oil, and my cup is running over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. All right, so our next reading is from Acts. And we hear another story of the disciples spreading the good news, as is pretty much the case for most of Acts, which is kind of what Pastor Jeff said at the beginning. However, although Peter is perhaps the most recognizable name in this scripture and the one who is doing all the flashy moves and does the resurrection or resuscitation in the mic, and Pastor Jeff will tell us all about that, I'm sure. When I read this, was most interested in Tabitha, characterized by the comfort and care that she offers others, which also at the beginning of today's service, Pastor Jeff was talking too about those communities and care. As we listen to today's lesson, I ask you to consider the lasting impacts of Tabitha's faith and her good works on those who knew her, as well as those beyond her immediate community and connection. Now in Joppa, there was a disciple whose name was Tabitha, which in Greek was Dorcas. She was devoted to good works and acts of charity. At that time, she became ill and died. When they had washed her, they laid her in a room upstairs. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples, who heard that Peter was there, sent 2 men to him with the request, "Please come with us without delay." So Peter got up and went with them. And when he arrived, he took them to the room upstairs. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other clothing that Dorcas had made them when she was with them. Peter put all of them outside, and then he knelt down and prayed. He turned to the body and said, "Tabitha, get up." Then she opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He gave her his hand, and he helped her up. Then, calling to the saints and widows, he showed her to be alive. This became known throughout Joppa, and many believed in the Lord.
Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial had been signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know of my own knowledge that there is what is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadliest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was as dead as a doornail. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to relate. And so begins Charles Dickens' famous story, A Christmas Carol. And so begins our story from Acts 9. Tabitha was dead. I find it interesting, perhaps even revealing, that I am more comfortable with the news of Marley's death than I am with the news of Tabitha's death. I think it has to do with how the stories unfold from there. I'm more comfortable with the ghost of Marley coming to visit Scrooge to offer a warning than I am with Peter coming to Tabitha's home to resuscitate her. And that is probably because I know Dickens does not expect me to believe that his Christmas ghost story actually happened, while there is a part of me that thinks that Luke maybe does expect me to believe that his miraculous story of resuscitation actually happened, and I have a difficult time believing it did. So here's my strategy for dealing with this story. I'm going to step back from the details and look at the bigger picture. Could Tabitha's friend only have thought she was dead and they were mistaken? Sure. Did resuscitations ever happen? Absolutely. Though if you ask a paramedic, you'll find out that it's pretty uncommon. Does God have the power to resuscitate someone without medical intervention? Sure. But that's even more unusual. Could the details that Luke says happened have actually happened? Yep, I'll grant that. The thing is, the truth I find in the story isn't in the details. I find the truth in this story when I step back and look at the bigger pattern. Last week, we heard the story of Paul, then going by his Hebrew name Saul, being knocked down to the ground by a flash of light. He hears a disembodied voice that identifies itself as the voice of Jesus, and the voice asks him, "Saul, why do you persecute me?" And the voice tells him, "Get up, enter the city, and you will be told what you are to do." The story says Paul got up from the ground, and though his eyes were open, he could see nothing. Paul enters the city, Damascus, and while he's there, he experiences a healing, and he is able to see again. And after that experience, Saul stops persecuting the followers of the way and becomes one of them. And right there in Damascus, he starts preaching about Jesus. That's how chapter 9 begins. If we continue reading chapter 9, the story takes us to the country west of Jerusalem. We encounter Peter in Lydda. The story says, there he, Peter, found a man named Aeneas, who had been bedridden for 8 years, for he was paralyzed. And Peter said to him, Aeneas, Jesus Christ heals you. Get up and make your bed. And immediately he got up. And then we get to today's reading. Lydda and Joppa aren't far apart, and in Joppa, Tabitha is dead. Though they've cleaned her body in preparation for burial, they send for Peter. And it doesn't take long for Peter to come, and the grieving community explains to him how important Tabitha was to the community and how beloved she was. And Peter clears the room, offers a prayer, and says to her, Tabitha, get up. My sermon title has given away the pattern that I am seeing here. 3 times people are knocked down, Saul by a blinding light, Aeneas by paralysis, Tabitha by death, and 3 times they are told to get up. Get up and enter the city, get up and make your bed, Tabitha, get up. And I'm reminded of something that Nadia Bolz-Weber wrote. The Christian faith, while wildly misrepresented in so much of American culture, is really about death and resurrection. It's about how God continues to reach into the graves we dig for ourselves and continues to pull us out, giving us new life in ways both dramatic and small. Now, I don't think Aeneas dug his own grave. We have no evidence that his paralysis was due to a choice or a series of choices that he made. Nor is there evidence that Tabitha dug her own grave, simply that she got sick and died. Saul, on the other hand, he chose to persecute people. He probably thought that if he was digging anybody's graves, he was digging the graves of the people he was persecuting. But it turns out he was digging his own grave. And Jesus reached in and pulled him out. All of these things, cruelty, disability, even death, are not the end. This chapter suggests that they are opportunities to rise up. While I don't expect someone who has died to rise up, the crushing blow we experience when a loved one dies is something from which we rise. And while I don't expect someone who is paralyzed to literally get up, it is an opportunity to rise. Any disability is an opportunity to rise. And even our checkered pasts do not disqualify us. Even the poor choices we've made do not keep God from reaching into our self-dug graves and telling us to get up as we are pulled out. Now, I don't want to leave this story without acknowledging some things about Tabitha. Luke tells us that Tabitha, her Aramaic name, was also known as Dorcas, a Greek name. They both mean gazelle, though Dorcas does not sound graceful to me. But it means gazelle. This little detail tells us something about her status in the community, I think. She was known within the followers of Jesus as Tabitha. That's the name Peter calls her. Having a Greek name as well, and Greek being the language of commerce, it suggests that she was a businesswoman. She will have been a major financial support to the community of Jesus' followers in Joppa. Luke also calls her a disciple. Now, in Joppa, there was a disciple whose name was Tabitha. Luke uses the feminine form of the noun that we translate disciple. It's the only time that feminine form of that noun is used in the New Testament. So not only is Luke telling us that she was probably a businesswoman, but that she was a disciple of Jesus. She is of an elevated rank in the community. She was devoted to good works and acts of charity, he writes. The recipients of those good works loved her so much. They wanted to show off what she had created for them when she showed them to Peter when he got there. It's pretty clear that the mourners, or at least some of them, were actually wearing clothing that she had made. They wanted to show it off. In other words, there's no doubt that Tabitha was an important part of the community. And this realization makes me think of two additional things. First, if Tabitha or God had said no to the resuscitation, Peter still would have reason to say, "Get up." Instead of telling Tabitha to get up, he could have told the community to metaphorically get up. Yes, breathe, because a pillar of the community has died, and continue her work. Get up and continue to be devoted to good works and acts of charity. The second thing, and I'm reading into the scripture a bit metaphorically here, but the second thing is that burnout is real. Ministries that help the poor and the sick can be consuming. They can be hard and tiring, and at times they can even be demoralizing. What if we look at the story of Tabitha as a metaphor for burnout? It's easy in our eagerness to do good, to rush in and to end up burning ourselves out. When that happens, it's even natural to back away from the community, even to leave the community because we have burnt ourselves out. And that's the exact opposite reaction of what we need when we're experiencing burnout or approaching burnout. When we're approaching burnout, we need to lean into community. Maybe stop doing and remember that we're human beings, not human doings, but to lean into community. We need the healing presence of others to bring us back to life so that we can continue to rise up. This week, as I've thought about this call to get up, the song "When I'm Gone" by Phil Oakes came to mind. Winborn, a group that I really like, did a beautiful arrangement of this folk song and recorded it, and I'm going to share it in a moment. The lyrics of this song remind us that there are things we can do now that we won't be able to do once we've died. And so this song and this scripture are making me wonder, what is God calling me to get up from and leave behind the way Saul left behind his persecution of the followers of Jesus? And what is God calling me to get up and do that I've assumed I am unable to do? The way Aeneas got up and made his bed. And what death is God calling me to get up from so that I can embrace life more fully right here and right now?